Good morning and welcome. My name is Chris Shelton, coming to you from a chilly and brisk sunny San Jose, California, the heart of Silicon Valley, with your DIY home healing for health, healing transformations, and longevity. What we're talking about today is something that's really exciting and important to me, which is referred to as Chinese face reading. What is Chinese face reading? Well, Chinese face reading was developed thousands of years ago because Chinese medical doctors at the time didn't think it was appropriate to touch women to diagnose or to assess. So they had to come up with a way to diagnose without touching them. And what's really cool about Chinese face reading is that it connects back to one of my favorite subjects, which is the 5 elements. And if you've been paying attention to these videos as well as my book, I really love the 5 elements because it's so practical and applicable to so many things besides our bodies, what's going on in our environment and everything else around us. So step 1 with the Chinese face reading, when we look at Chinese face reading, we can actually see by looking at the person's face, by their facial shape, what element typology is. Now in my book, if you click on the link below, in my book I do have a 5-element questionnaire quiz that will actually help you understand what your personality typology is and what organ governs you. And the importance of this is that not only what organ governs you, but what are your strengths, and then how to tell when you're not in your power. So that's really cool. So we could actually tell by body typology and facial shape just what a person is. And again, we could be a combination of element types or organs that govern us, but most often we are a predominant one element type. And generally speaking, the question is, well, Chris, can my primary element typology change? And yes, it can. If you have some life-changing circumstance that forces you to change, that will change your primary element typology, or bring other organs or other elements back or closer to what your element typology is. So when we look at the facial shapes, you can tell if somebody is an earth type. An earth type means that their stomach and spleen and their pancreas governs them. Those people tend to have a trapezoid face or a square face, and earth people are natural peacemakers. They tend to be very grounded, and when they're out of balance, so they tend to worry a lot. Maybe they have overweight, underweight conditions, and they can be very stubborn. They don't like to be pushed. Wood typology, if you look at a wood person, they tend to have a rectangular shaped face or an inverted trapezoid face. And wood people are natural born leaders. They're great military leaders, police officers, civil servants, leaders of companies, and then they help to create things also. So when we look at wood type, that means that their liver, their gallbladder governs them. And when the liver and gallbladder is out of balance, or when they're out of their wood typology, then they will not be leaders. They may tend to suffer from addiction issues. They may tend to suffer from depression issues, control issues. And don't get me wrong, all the typologies could have control issues or whatever, but the wood typology will tend, when they're out of balance, to want to really control everything around them. Okay, so then when we look at the fire type, now the fire typology relates to your heart, pericardium, small intestine, what is known as a triple warmer or triple burner, and the fire person, when they're in balance, then they lead with their heart. So they're all about love, and when they're all about love, then they tend to brighten up the room. So they're very charismatic people. People love to be around them because they exude so much love. But when fire people are out of balance, then what it looks like is that they tend to suffer from manic episodes. They can also lack boundaries. They tend to have to worry about things to deal with their heart, like high or low blood pressures or issues with the valves. Now, the fire-shaped face is either a heart-shaped face or a upside triangle-shaped face. That normally represents the fire typology. Now the metal typology, when we look at the metal type, that represents somebody who's governed by their large intestine, lungs, colon, and skin. So the lungs are the predominant element or the predominant organ that governs them. And the metal typology, they tend to have like a diamond-shaped face. They tend to be very stoic when they're in balance. You can normally tell the metal type because they don't really share their emotions, because the lungs here is the shielding or the guarding to protect them, but they're very, they tend to like the finer things, like fine clothes, or designer clothes, fine food, those types of things. They're also good leaders. They tend to be very meticulous and organized, and like things in a neat and tidy fashion when they're in balance. When they're out of balance, the metal type will tend to maybe suffer also from depression, sorrow, skin issues like eczema, dry skin, or peeling skin. What else will they have? Oh, they won't tend to show their emotions too much, so if they are sad and they repress it, then they will have this unproductive dry cough. Now, when we look at the water typology is represented by a circular face, and the water type represents the kidneys and the urinary bladder. And water people are considered the wise leaders. They're very smart, very wise, and they tend to like things also in a certain order. And when the kidneys are out of balance, or when this water typology is out of balance, then they tend to become recluse, inert. Maybe fear will show up more for them. They will tend to have problems like with leaky bladder, or low backache, excessive sex drive. And this is how you would tell if the water typology is out of balance. In my second book that I'm writing right now, we're discussing this in greater detail. Okay, so to summarize here, when we look at the 5 elements on the face, we can actually look at the shape of the face, and this will tell us so much about what a person's primary typology is, which, again, as I said a few minutes ago, it's the deviation from your typology that starts to indicate disease. Okay, but on top of that, what's really cool about Chinese face reading is that different parts of the face actually represent different internal organs of the body. So for example, when we look at the water element, well, where does the water element show up on the face? Well, the water element, which relates back to the kidneys, shows up in your ears, your plethrum, your chin, and under the eye area. And you can normally tell the overall longevity of a person by how big their ears are, or how big their plethrum is. You can tell their overall will, like how much willpower they have, by how strong that chin is. And just a little tip health-wise, if you have a little line that bisects the earlobe here, this is normally an indicator of some type of issue with the heart, in particular with the valves of the heart. When we look at those features, we can actually tell by the strength of the ears, how big the ears are, how long the person's life will be, except for if they get hit by a car or something, how long a person's life will be, how well they fight off disease, and their overall ability to help to fight off stress, and how they deal with stress. Okay. Also, this area here, this plethrum, for you women out there, the plethrum actually shows fertility. It goes for men and women, but if a woman, for example, has a line bisecting above the upper lip here, a straight line that goes across, it can be very faint. It could tend to mean that they may have fertility issues and may have a hard time conceiving a baby. Okay, so from there, when we look at the metal element, well, the metal element represents the upper cheeks, represents our nose, and when we look at the nose represents our power. Oh, also our nostrils too. You know, you could actually tell by looking at the size of a nostril just how giving or how stingy somebody is. And if you or somebody you know has little itty bitty little nostrils, it tends to mean that you're very conservative with your money and energy, and you don't give it out that easy. So people with little nostrils may not be that giving as partners, and that's okay. So if you want to open up those nostrils a little more, start practicing giving a little bit more. Something like, for example, the bump on the nose. I just saw on Instagram a couple days ago this gal with the arch on her nose removed, and the thing about that is that the nose actually represents our power. How much stamina do we have? Because this connects back into our lungs. How well do we invest in money? And that arch on the nose actually means that that person has a potential for a lot of power. Now, it'd be interesting to see, kind of like what happened with Michael Jackson, as he continued to go on along in his career, he kept on getting nose surgeries and making his nose smaller and smaller and smaller, and he slowly was losing his power. Now, that could be coincidence, or it could be a direct reflection of of the nose being reduced in size. Who knows? Our nose will tell us how well a person invests, how well their stamina is, what kind of power that they have. Actually, and also you can tell by the top of the nose here, if that area of the nose near the bridge of the nose, if that area is really skinny, that tends to mean that the person has weak neck as well. Okay, so that's the metal element. The earth element is seen in the lips, the bridge of the nose itself. We could actually tell if a person has a line bisecting here, if they have a potential for high or low blood sugar. The lips, the upper lip area, the lower cheeks is also represented by the earth and stomach and spleen, and the mouth itself. A person that has a big mouth and full lips, that normally represents that those people are very giving, they're very passionate. If there's a lot of lines, especially in the lower lip, that means that those people like to laugh a lot. Now, if they have a lot of lines above their lip, or that lip is heavily marked, then, or what they refer to as smoker lines, that means that person, even if they've never smoked in their entire life, that means that person actually is over nurturing other people and not bringing enough back to themselves. So this is pretty cool to see. If you see somebody who smiles, and when they smile and their gums show, that tends to mean that they are a little bit selfish. So if they have a very gummy smile, they're probably pretty selfish. So if you want to not be so selfish and start being more aware of that, and then start again giving a little bit more. Now, if you combine a big mouth, big full lips with big nostrils, you have somebody who's really giving, and that would be somebody that would be really good, let's say on a campaign for charity to help to raise money, or if you needed to get money for a charity, you want to talk to those people. So our lips actually will tell us what is going on as far as diseases go, like coloration around the mouth will also tell us potential diseases as well. And also the jowl area, this area here, is also considered connected to the earth. And what's interesting is that during famine times, people that actually had more weight on themselves, actually they consider this area money bags, which would also relate back to the metal element too, but these money bags would actually represent too how well they'd be able to fight off famine. So if somebody was too thin, then generally speaking, then they would pass on if famine came. But if somebody had a little bit more meat on their bones and have these jowls like we have in this pig ear, we're talking about this pig, then what will happen is that it would mean, or tend to mean, that that person may live to outlast the famine. Okay, so we covered the metal element, the earth element, the water element. Okay, so the wood element, where does the wood element show up? The wood element shows up in our jaw structure, so somebody who has a very strong jaw. It also shows up in our brow bone and eyebrows, and the eyes themselves also represent the temples, represent this wood element, and the wood element is connected back to the liver and the gallbladder. So we could tell, for example, how controlling somebody is by looking at the strength of their brow bone and their eyebrows. We could actually tell how many friends a person has. You know that a person with short eyebrows, if you know somebody has very short eyebrows, meaning that it doesn't extend from one end of the eye to the next, that normally means that person is pretty stubborn, but also it means that person doesn't really have that many friends, and because he or she does not want to have to repay favors, they will not ask for favors, and they will want to do something on their own. So the brow bone would tell us, and the jaw structure would tell us how controlling a person is, potential for anger, how much testosterone somebody has. Two of the most changeable features on a person's face is actually a person's mouth and their eyes. So you could actually change the features subtly. For example, if you're somebody with very small and squinted eyes, that means that you're very self-critical, critical of other people. Then if you want to change that, and you recognize that, then what do? Relax a little bit. Give some people some grace, give yourself some grace and some love, and guess what? Those eyes will start to open up more. You can normally tell diseases by looking at those areas, like, for example, discolored temple area may be a sign that the person has addiction issues. So once again, toxicity leading back to that liver and the gallbladder. All right, what's the last one? Oh, the fire element. Now, the fire element shows up in the tips and corners of everything. So the tip of your nose, the corners of your eyes, the tips of the eyebrows. So if you have very fine, thin eyebrows at the very end, if you have a point at the very tip of the nose itself, the tips of the ears all represent or connected back to your heart and your pericardium. Also, the glistening of the eyes as well too also tells us the condition of the heart. And they say that the heart houses the mind, which houses the Shen, which is our spirit. So the more clear and bright somebody's eyes are, guess what? The more intact that their spirit is, and that normally represents that this spirit has a place to reside. And you know, what's interesting is that I'm talking about these different features, like the ears, for example, the nose, for example, and how it relates back to, like the ears connect back to the water element, the nose connects back to the metal element, but the tip of the nose actually connects back to the fire element. And if you have a line that bisects the nose here, a very faint line, that's how we normally tell if somebody is suffering from a broken heart or has a broken heart that hasn't fully mended. If a person has a line that bisects through in between the nostrils here, that normally is an indicator of high or low blood pressure. Also valve issues with the heart, so they have to be careful of that, especially if you're young and you notice this. Then as you age, you're really going to have to look out for issues with the heart, so be very careful. We could tell if the ears are pointed like Mr. Spock, that the person will tend to have extreme highs and lows, meaning that their emotional state is like very manic. So those emotions, the emotional state of that person will change drastically. So how do we use this? Well, number one, we use this first and foremost to look at ourselves and to understand how these different features, lines, and the shape of our face represents not only our primary typology, but also what organs governs us and what diseases and what past traumas that we have inside of our body. So what's so important about this? Well, this helps us understand what Qigong practice is to do. So for example, if I know that I'm very controlling and my wood element is out of balance, I'm going to want to do the liver move. And this is found on our YouTube series, Qigong, Chris Shelton Qigong, and we have both the 30 days of Qigong on there. Click on the link below, as well as the Qigong tip of the week, which is only a few minutes long. So if I know I have these anger issues, controlling issues, depression issues, then I'm going to go ahead and do the liver move. If, for example, I know that I'm a little bit manic, or I have these alternating mood swings, maybe I do have a broken heart, or I do feel this thing of abandonment, loneliness, and lack of joy, then I'm going to do the heart move, okay, working with the fire element. And again, these movements are all on the YouTube page and also inside my book. Okay, so if I'm suppressing my grief, if I have an unproductive dry cough, if I'm not investing well, if I'm too stingy with my money and my energy, then maybe I need to loosen up a little bit. So then I'm going to do the lung exercise, connecting back to the metal element to help to clear that out. Okay. So I've given a lot of information in a short period of time. We actually have a course that we're developing online. We've already recorded the course on Chinese face reading. We just have to go through and edit it, and it's very fascinating. So even if you're not a practitioner of Oriental medicine or even a doctor or a nurse, what's really great about the Chinese face reading is it's really good to help to understand personal and business relationships. Okay, so that's the lung move, bringing back the courage. If we're somebody who worries a lot, maybe we are over nurturing, we're not giving enough back to ourselves, so we see those fine little smoker lines above the lips. We would focus on the spleen and focus on loving ourselves more and giving back and nurturing, because if you think about it, your mouth is the entryway for the food, which goes into our stomachs and nurtures us and nourishes us. But it's not only the food, it's the words that we speak to ourselves and to others, and the words that we allow other people to speak to us. So those words could either be toxic, like toxic food, or they could be very nourishing. All right, so if you have diabetes, like I said, that line across the in between the eyebrows at the bridge of the nose there, then We could do this move as well too to help to benefit the spleen and the pancreas. Okay, very simple to do. And then finally, last but not least, then if you're somebody that's whose water element is out of sync, and let's say you're tired all the time. I mean, there's other things that could actually cause tiredness. It's not just the kidneys themselves, but if you're tired all the time, have a weak sex drive, tend to be timid, or tend to have lack of willpower, that means that the kidneys are out of balance. Frequent urination, nocturnal emissions, those types of conditions. Then you could actually do the kidney move to help to tonify those kidneys or strengthen those kidneys. So I'm just placing my hand here on my right kidney, and if you don't know where the kidneys are located, they're located opposite the navel on the lower lumbar. So the left kidney. And what's interesting is that left kidney is connected to the yin aspect of our being, which is the foundation for the blood and all the fluids. So that's considered cooling in nature. And when I work with the right kidney, then the right kidney is kidney yang, which is the heat or the motive force for transformation inside the body. And we need this heat in order to assimilate food, in order to move blood to the extremities, etc. Okay, so this has helped to work with fear and fright and shock also. Okay, so very simple to do, and then you just come back and pull down the heavens 3 times in order to recollect and ground yourself. 3rd time, and release. Wow, I feel great. So here you have it. This is what's so cool about these practices is that, and what I love about Chinese medicine and Chinese philosophy is that everything is connected. So everything that we're talking about here, whether we're talking about the energetic properties of food, which we're going to be doing here in a couple of weeks, energetic properties of food, if we're talking about functions of the organs, if we're talking about the changing seasons, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's all connected back. Everything is connected back. And today what we're talking about, just as a recap, is we're talking about how does the 5 elements show up on our face. First thing we talked about was facial shape. Second thing we talked about is where the different elements actually, even if you are, let's say, an earth type, we all possess the 5 elements on different features of the face. And it's by looking at those features, it helps us understand ourselves better. And what's fun about taking the class in Chinese face reading is that, yes, it's fun to be able to read other people's faces and kind of understand their personality or kind of see what traumas that they've been through. But really the Chinese face reading is a mirror back on yourself, to look back at yourself, because the face does not lie. And like I tell people, if I see a certain line or feature on a person's face, that means that disease or that emotional trauma is still stuck there. So here we have it. My name is Chris Shelton, coming to you from sunny San Jose, California. If you want more information, or if you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about here, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and ask the questions, and I love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to give you the answers. So until next time, as our gardener comes back around, I'm Chris Shelton. Say La Chi.